Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? So glad to see all of you here. Really, really fun. So we're doing a series of Molly's Salons, and as you've seen, because you've started to sign up, I think we have another 6 or 7 of them. I know this is going to be one of my favorite.
Of course.
Has to be, right?
Hi, everybody.
So this is Charles Randolph-Wright. I think you all, you have to pour your own glass.
You have to pour.
Pour your water. Charles used to be an actor, I did too. We know how to pour water on stage without spilling it, right?
Oh, so, okay, yes.
A
Toast.
clink. Toast.
Good, we did it. And to you.
So, Charles and I have known each other for 25 years. And we first met when I was at Berkeley Rep directing the West Coast premiere of How I Learned to Drive by Paula Vogel. And Paula said to me, "Oh my God, you have to get over to ACT to see Insurrection by Robert O'Hara, directed by Charles Randolph-Wright." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "You will love it." So I went to ACT to see the show, and she was absolutely right. It was like my hair was on fire afterwards. And I called Charles on the phone because we didn't even meet at that time. And I asked him to come in and direct a show for Arena in my very first season. So this was probably, it must have been in January.
Okay.
Because I had been appointed a month or 2 before, and the board said, "And now you choose the season." And I had to choose a season within a 2-month period of time.
Right.
But fortunately, because I'd been an artistic director for many, many years, 19 years at Perseverance Theater, I knew how to do that. And I saw Charles's work, and I just thought, ooh, I think he's right for Arena. I think he's right for the audience there, and he's certainly right for me. That production blew me away. He had things in the production that I was just saying to Charles earlier, it was more modern than a lot of modern plays now, and what was happening on stage. It was really, really fantastic.
So you have to understand that I get this, I had worked at ACT, I knew of Arena, but it never, I didn't realize I'd actually been here years before. But I get this phone call from this white woman in Alaska asking me to do a show, and I'm okay. And that started this relationship, and Molly truly became my soulmate that first season in theater, and then our 25 years and 12, I guess 13, because it's the play with all the playwrights that we did.
Yeah.
And but just the kind of work that I've been able to do here, and just that instant thing of you never know where it's going to come from, because typically I would have hung up on that white woman from Alaska. So
Glad he did.
So that's how it began.
That's how it began, and it began by doing Oak and Ivy by Kathleen McGee Anderson, which was a big success about Paul Laurence Dunbar. My mother's favorite show that she ever saw at Arena Stage.
She would always say, "It's not Oak and Ivy." Like she would see something in Hollywood Collins, she just kept saying
it's
it.
not
I love
Oak and
that.
Ivy. But I wanted Charles to start just by painting a picture of what it was 25 years ago to work at Arena. What it looked like out on the waterfront, what it looked like in the rehearsal hall, what it looked like. How was it, Charles?
Well, before I came and met you and we started talking about this, when I was in college, my roommate, one of my roommates, I think one of my roommates is here, actually in here, but one of my roommates grew up in DC, and we came for the weekend to DC, and he lived on 607 H Street. I'll never forget this. And he said, "Oh, we're going to take you to a show." And we came here, and I saw Candide in this theater, and it's the first time I'd seen theater in the round, and it blew me away. You know, I just thought, what is this place? That the show, which with every type of person in it, you know, that. So I had this image, and I'd heard about it, and then started researching Arena. So when you called, I knew what this theater was. So I ended up coming back and being here. Now, back in the dark ages, 25 years ago, I mean, it was a frightening neighborhood. You know, we used to call there used to be a mall that we called the Mall of the Dead, and we rehearsed there, and you'd have to have someone walk you to the mall and you'd have to have a key. You have to have the keypad to get in. I mean, it was dangerous. There was nothing on the wharf. It's so amazing. We were having dinner, and I said, "Molly, you did this. Look at this wharf. This didn't exist. It was a fish place. It was the fish market was still there. I think a restaurant and Channel Inn, which served people by the hour. You know, So you had like, I wish the best little whorehouse, not in Texas, the best little whorehouse in DC, perhaps. But it was the area, the energy was so frightening.
It was rough.
It was frightening.
Yeah.
And so you had to be careful. Typically, all of us stayed right next door, so you didn't have to travel as much, but it wasn't conducive to creating. And you had to find that within this space, and that's why it became so special to us. And Maurice Hines still talks about when we did Guys and Dolls here, how much he loved working in that horrible room with no windows. I don't know why he loved that, but it was the energy, the spirit of what was created here. And that you, and also, Molly, something that you've done is something that I discovered that Berry Gordy did in working with him, because people would always say, every city had the Motown equivalents. Every city had a girl group and a boy group and a this and a Michael and that type. And why did Detroit do all of this? And it was because of Berry Gordy. Other cities had that, but Berry Gordy brought that together. And what he did was instilled in everyone, and even in us as we did Motown the Musical, to be our very best. And he challenged us constantly to do that. And that's what you did. And so we didn't realize that the people that were walking in the neighborhood that we should not have been near. We didn't realize that it was dangerous, that it was because we were doing work. We were doing art. We did the work for the work. We weren't trying to move it to Broadway. We weren't trying to make it something else, make it a television show. We were doing this work that spoke to us in that moment. And everything that I was able to do here did that, of that time, all the things that were going on. And even with the space being as difficult as it was, it pushed us. It wasn't, you look at this astounding theater now, which still I think is one of the most beautiful theaters in the world. Yeah. And that this world-class theater, the theaters may not have been that thin, but the work we did was. We decided that we didn't have limits to our work just because we couldn't go to the mall and we couldn't,
And we couldn't find a place to have lunch.
We couldn't have a place to have lunch because we would mix in with other people in the Channel Inn.
Yeah.
They had
Best
great
grits
grits
in
though.
town.
They had really great grits and breakfast. Because I'm still a Southern boy and I had to have my grits in the morning. But it was, despite it, we created work that I'm so proud of, that I will never forget that we did, and shows that resonated and work that resonated, and people came here anyway. Now it's an attraction to come to the wharf.
Right.
People came to see this work, and that's what we did.
Well, I'll also never forget the moment after Oak and Ivy. I said to Charles, I kind of have a feeling you'd be good at directing musicals. Would you be good at directing musicals? And Charles is like, Molly, Let's talk about my past as somebody on stage in Dreamgirls. Let's talk about what I've done my entire life. And I was like, great. And so then that was Guys and Dolls with
And it was your
Maurice.
suggestion. You handed it to me. You said, look at this. And it's not something I had thought about doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I read it and went, oh my God, this is so perfect. So right then, because it was 2000.
Yep.
It was the millennium.
Yep.
And you know, none of us knew. And it ran. I mean, it was New Year's Eve,
Yep.
actually.
Yep.
And people were thinking, you know, are we going to have a theater? You know, it was
Yep.
that. But it was so magnetic to be able to do that and to work in that theater that I saw years before.
Yeah.
To come in, working in the round is the hardest thing to do and is the most thrilling thing to do because you cannot hide. You know, you on stage when you're proscenium, you can, you know, someone may not see things, but and when you're in the round, everything you see, and you're also watching people watch it, which is also so thrilling. You know, so I loved the work that I got to do in the Fitch. It was amazing.
And I really watched Charles direct that. And people had said to me, Molly, you really need to start directing musicals. And I kept saying to people, you know, I only do serious theater.
Molly Smith. Okay.
That's what I always said that. I was a total snob from the time I was a kid, that I would not do musical theater. And so my partner Suzanne, the Meads, Mark Chagall, everybody kept saying to me, you should do it. Your style is just quirky enough to do musicals. And so I did South Pacific. And the morning after my first rehearsal, I woke up and I said to Suzanne, I was born to direct musicals. So it's that old story of that which we reject the most,
Yes.
we are the most drawn to. So, Charles, what is the most difficult time you have ever had in a rehearsal hall? What's the hardest nut to crack, most difficult moment, most difficult time period, the thing that scared you, the thing that excited you?
There's several things that the first thing that hit me was Ruined because
Yeah.
that was probably the most difficult work I've done.
Yeah.
And again, being in the Fitch,
Yep.
and it was so raw to do this. And emotionally, this was the first time I was very aware of having to truly take care of the actors. That every day we would leave rehearsal and leave what we just did in the room.
Yeah.
And every night when they would do the show, they would come together on stage after everyone had gone to leave those characters on stage because it was so difficult to tell that story and to deal with that world and those lives and to become those people. So trying to find, I always try to find joy in devastation. I think that's the thing that you must do. And I always have fun in the room, as you know. I have to have a great time. And it was very difficult to do that in that piece. And to find humor where I could, to find places where we could enjoy and we could laugh. And I remember one time, I think you walked by the room and we were in there screaming, laughing, and doing something. And she was like, aren't you rehearsing Ruined? You know, it was that. And it was the only way we could rehearse it.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it was the only way that because we wanted the trust we had to have with each other, the trust the actors had to have. And I just didn't, I had to each day try to figure out how to keep doing that, how to find that. It was difficult, you know, and I think of different times of shows where something in the world happened
Yeah.
and you'd have to go into the room and still do the work. I had an assistant one time say to me, oh my God, you always know what you're doing. You always come in and you're always prepared. She said, don't you ever question yourself? I was like, every day. Mm-hmm. Every day I'm like, can I get out of bed and do this? Mm-hmm. Can I go in and be honest and do the work? And also not be afraid. When you said, when I did Insurrection Holding
Yeah.
History
Yeah.
and ACT, and I remember with the actors, the very first day, when an actor said to me, "What is so and so?" And I said, "I don't know." And I just saw the look on their faces, because so many times as a director, you think you have to know everything. And that's a mistake. It's that I don't know. I will find out what it is, but I'm not going to tell you something that I don't know, that I can't believe. And when it's been very difficult working in a space because something going on in the world,
Yeah.
that's been those, I think there are different times like that, were times of blue was in New York when 9/11
Yep,
happened,
yep.
and I just, it was having to go, we were one of the first shows to come back and run, and to do that was impossible. It just thought, why are we doing this show? And it was to work like that. So I think it's those, I mean, as I said, ruin was the first thing that hit me, but being in situations where something in the world happens, and theater is the only form where you bring the world into the space. So when a show would happen, and the audience brings that in, something that happened that day, something that they're feeling, and how you have to adjust that. That's what we have to do in the room working. It's the same thing.
I'm thinking back for me, and I think you know this, Charles, but when I was going to the American University, I had an internship where I was a drama therapist at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. And they hadn't had a drama therapist there for a long time. And I was busy trying to figure out what that meant, right? And they said, "Who do you want to work with?" And I said, "Well, I want to work with all the different types of people that are here. I wanted to work with the chronics. I wanted to work with the criminally insane. I wanted to work with the drug addicts. I wanted to work with everybody." So I went up to work with the criminally insane.
Which prepared you for the theater, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I got into a big room with everybody, and I was going to explain exactly what we were going to do in theater. And there were probably about 40 men and myself and a couple of guards and a few other people. And they were talking about something else because it was a big group meeting. And suddenly a fight started. 30 of them were up fighting each other.
Wow.
And I'm like, and at the end of it, most of them got moved into solitary. And then I stood up and I said, "I can't teach you anything about drama. You've just showed me what this is. I cannot teach you anything about drama. But what I can teach you about is form and improvisation. And I'll bet you guys are great improvisers." They ended up being the most brilliant improvisers. So, Charles, you're absolutely right. Because of my work there at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, nothing in the rehearsal hall has ever truly surprised me. Because I know if I need to, I can just put mattresses up on the wall, psychological mattresses, and let people just go. But I think there were a few times when it's been really difficult to do theater because of something that's happened in the world. For me, it was Carousel when Trump was elected, and the whole cast was devastated. So we had big, long conversations about it. And much more recently, a year ago, with the war in Ukraine with Russia. And that's kind of one of the beautiful things about what we do as theater artists, is we take what's happening in the world and we fuel it on stage. We utilize it on stage because we're working always with human emotion and story.
Right.
And finding ways to be able to coalesce that, to use that as a lightning rod, to be able to take the lightning rod out to the audience, has always been something that's been really fascinating to me.
Well, this past summer, American Prophet, Roe versus Wade happening.
Yes.
When we were, and so how do we deal with this? How do we tell these stories in the midst of stories being taken away? And what that is, and just that world of that. So yes, absolutely. It's but I think it also fuels us, because this is what we do. This is
Yeah.
what this is how we have to help heal and change and do that work as artists. And our work has to reflect that. And it does. Even in a musical that you think is frivolous, there's something in there that you can do, and you always interject things, and that's the reason too why musicals work for you, because your mind is on so many different levels. It's not just one thing. And when you do a musical, you have to deal with so many aspects, so many different things all colliding, and how you bring those together to tell that story. And that's why it speaks to you. It's the ultimate challenge, and it's thrilling when it works. And when it doesn't work, you just go to the next thing, Okay, so I have a question for you, because we're supposed these questions. Sidney Poitier said that you have to be proud of your failures.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's always difficult, because I always want it to be perfect, and I want to deal with that. What is that? What saying about The Room is, what failure are you proud of?
Oh my gosh, so many. So many. Okay, in Alaska, a project called Peking Duck. Probably wasn't the best idea. It was a glorious failure. It was, we always did plays that were written by people in Alaska,
Yes.
and it was just crazy, but not crazy good, just kind of crazy. And I think back to working with an actress who shall not be named, that I was never able to truly communicate with her. A great actress, a really great actress. And if you whispered in my ear at the bar afterwards,
Yes.
I'll let you know who it was. But because I wasn't able to truly communicate with her, I felt like at a complete loss. And it frustrated me. It made me angry. And then I also just switched, and I just moved into go with her on her wavelength. Just go with her on her wavelength and find a way through. And she eventually did a brilliant performance, but I never liked her. I never liked her. I never felt like a heart feeling like I usually feel for all of the artists. And to me, that was really sad. So you are both a director. He was an actor. He's a playwright. So, yeah, no, snap, snap, right? And at a certain point, he said he had this play he wanted to write, which was called Blue. And I think I heard the first reading of it, and I said, we're doing it next season.
No, it was even worse than that. We were doing Oak and Ivy,
Okay.
and Shona Tucker, I grabbed a couple of people in the show, and I said, read this for me, I'm working on this. And then Shona told you, Charles has this play. I hadn't finished it. And you said, and then you heard part of it, but you put it in the season, and I hadn't even finished the play. And it was that thing of, ooh, can I tell this? And it's my family, and I don't know if I can put this out there. And it was frightening. It was.
But see,
frightening
I
to
knew
do.
it was a hot topic for you.
Yeah.
And that you would write it well because it was about your family. And, okay, it's had quite a success. So that was a pretty good choice.
It was a great choice. But it was
But
really,
it scared you.
it was a scathing portrayal of my mother.
Yeah.
It was entertaining, but it was a scathing portrayal of her. And I remember you helped me, because I kept saying, all the press, I kept thinking, okay, I would say it's an amalgam of women that I've known and all this stuff, trying to take the onus off of it being my mother, right? And I would think of all these things. Felicia Rashad played my mother. My mother came to see it, thought she was the perfect mother. There was nothing, I thought, oh my God, of course. So the idea, but I was so thrilled to put my family on stage
Yeah.
at a time when you didn't see families like this on stage.
Yeah.
And and when we opened in New York, there had never been an middle upper class black family
Yep.
in a major play in New York City. And this
Yep.
was 2000,
Yep.
And having that, and we were talking about this earlier, the New York Times in the review of Blue said that my family did not exist. And that's when I stopped reading reviews. That's the day I stopped reading. And Molly and I both don't read the reviews of our shows. If there's something that people say, I said, everyone will tell you either the good or bad. They will let you know. But I can't let someone have that power over me.
Yeah.
And typically, someone who's white and male who does not have the experience of what I'm working on or dealing with, I could not. And once that happened in the New York Times, you're a reviewer. You can say you don't like how I wrote it. You can say you don't like the play. But to say that my family didn't exist destroyed me.
Yeah.
Destroyed me. I just couldn't. I couldn't deal with that. And the only way I could deal with it was to vow not to ever read that again. And
Yeah.
so. It's funny, when I did Trouble in Mind in New York, LaChance, who starred in it, said, if you don't read the New York Times, I'm not going on tonight, And it was this kind of, it was so interesting to have this complete circle where someone completely got what I was doing,
Yeah.
And what Alice wrote so many years ago. And I still didn't read. I said, well, you have to read it. I can't read this on the page. But, you've gone through that. It's that thing of what people see and their arrogance, them feeling that they know your life better than you, and that's part of criticism. I understand what that is, but you cannot let, as an artist, I realize I can't let that criticism overwhelm me, that it can help me in making things better. That's what I want. But I couldn't, it really destroyed me to see that, because it was so personal, because it was my family, and it was the New York Times. It wasn't, I just thought, how do I deal with this?
Well, Charles, I don't read reviews of my own work, and I haven't for 25 years. I haven't. I don't want someone else to tell me what they think I need to be doing as an artist. Because I think as an artist, one has to follow their own path. Now, that doesn't mean that when I'm directing, I don't bring in Charles, I don't bring in somebody like Tazewell Thompson, Alan Paul, when I'm directing a musical, and they each give me intense notes on what they're seeing and where strengths and weaknesses are. So it isn't that, but my sense is reviewers need to give you context. They need to frame it historically. They need to give you a bigger picture. I think the perfect kind of review is one that combines a feature and a review, so that there's more of a fulsome feeling that an audience member can receive, instead of something like an up and down motion, which is what most notices are. And I think it's a problem with criticism today. And speaking of criticism, Charles and I have two of the most complicated mothers that you can ever imagine.
Yes.
And yet we also had mothers, along with the critical piece, who said to us at different points in our lives, you will be whatever you dream of being. All you have to do is work for it.
Right.
And I feel sad for people that don't have that in their lives, because I think that drove me.
Yes.
And speaking of being driven, here we are, we've just come out of this huge pandemic, which is still ongoing. It's not over. This pandemic, because you guys are all still wearing masks, we get to not wear masks, right? And there's been a huge quantum shift in theaters. There's been a huge shift in young people coming into the theater. There's been a huge shift in terms of black plays on Broadway. There's lots of big shifts. Can you talk about what thrills you about that, and what you're afraid of? What you're seeing out there that makes you just kind of go, okay, this is not good. See, Zelda and two intrepid women created the revolution that started the not-for-profit theater movement. They created it 80 years ago, 75 years ago.
Jeez.
And I've always waited for, what's the next revolution? We're in it. We're in it. We're in that level of radical change. And sometimes when you're in the middle of radical change, you can't see it, but writers can.
Right.
So that's why I'm asking Charles.
I didn't realize until this pandemic that the Harlem Renaissance came out of a pandemic, that it came out of the Spanish flu, the influenza, and the Roaring Twenties. That all came out of a pandemic. So it was a seismic shift that
Right.
happened. And Molly, I told you this because it's something I have to write, but I haven't been able to write. I was working on a house music opera in England at the Young Vic when the pandemic in March of 2020. And so the United States had shut down. Of course, the Brits were like, keep calm, carry on. And we were still rehearsing, we were still working. And eventually we had to stop. People started getting ill. I was on the next to last flight out of London, and with Inman, who had created this piece. And a week later, I started having symptoms, but luckily, so then you didn't even know what COVID was. Like
Right.
the test took 2 weeks to come back, and by then I wasn't, I was negative. It didn't make sense. I knew something happened, but I started having these dreams every night. And I think a couple of people I saw on television talked about this too, but I started having these like insane dreams that were like IMAX movies, and every night it was just crazy. And my great grandfather, who died during influenza, was coming to me in my dreams. And basically, saying, why are we still doing this? I mean, it was so vivid. It's like I'd never, ever dreamt about him. And all this kept coming to me about this, where we were and what we had to do. I mean, it got to the point where I'd go to bed going, God, please let me just sleep tonight, please. But
No
it was
more, Grandpa.
exactly. I can't do this. But it was this idea of what we have to do out of something this catastrophic. This how do we take this and heal, as I was saying before, but how do we use, because a shift has happened. A major shift has happened. And when I feel like I want to step back and not do as much as I get older, then you have a governor like DeSantis say that African American, the view of African American, our experience, our story is not valid.
Right.
It's the same as the New York Times review to me. You do not exist. You are not valid. And so that's when I have to fight harder. Mm-hmm. That's when I have to go, no, I will do this work. No, I will do more to open minds, to open, not to tell them what to think, but to make them, give them access to other things. And as you were saying, I call it the gift of permission that our mothers gave us, because it's the ultimate gift when someone tells you that you can do something and pushes you to be something, and they won't settle for less. It makes you crazy.
Right.
But it also, because of that, because of my upbringing, I was willing to go and knock down doors and deal with the aggressions and microaggressions that I still face every single day. I have never been equal to my white male comrades. I've never been treated the same until recently. Things have shifted. And I did this television show in Chicago 2 years ago. And I was on set, and I called a couple of friends of mine. I think I called you, and I just said, this is so strange. And you were like, what? I said, they're treating me equally. I've never had this. I've always had to go in and prove myself. Right. And I would see someone else come in, no experience, having no idea what they're doing, failing up, as I call it, and I always had to fight and do this. And I walked onto this set, and they were like, oh my God, we're so honored you're doing this, and thank you for being on this show. And I just thought, wow, I've never felt this. I felt it here.
Yeah.
This was my home. And I love when I did I forgot how many, it's maybe 10, 15 years ago, the Washingtonian, is that the magazine?
Yeah.
And they picked like different people. I mean, there was a chef or so-and-so, and they had me as one of the, and we did this whole photo shoot.
Yep.
And I kept saying to them, you guys, you realize I don't live in Washington, right? But because of my work, I am a DC artist.
Yep.
I am part of this family. And everyone, I love when people write things and they say, my home theater You
Yep.
know, they'll say that about Arena, and
Yep.
I love when I see that and hear that, because it is. And so when you talk about, I was part of what I call the Black Fall in New York. All the black plays were there for the fall, and by the spring they were all gone, and the white plays came in. And I thought, I love that there's all this work, but why did it have to happen right after the pandemic? Why did this? And so the Hollywood Reporter, I did this interview with Hollywood Reporter, and they never say what you say, but this one, it's my favorite, I think my favorite interview ever, and just how she framed it, and we were talking about it, and she said to me, why hasn't this happened? She said, why is it just now happening that these artists are being recognized and this is happening? And I said, ask them. And that became like this hashtag, and people were all over saying, ask them. I said, we've done everything. I did everything. I studied,
Yep.
I worked, I did all the work, and then it still wouldn't happen, and others that it's not happened for. I'm not the one to ask why that's not happened.
Yep.
So what we have to do is to continue doing the work, but we have to find ways to open doors that have been closed, to give people possibilities. There's a friend of mine who is in Motown, who I call my son, because he's from Carolina, and he saw this house online and decided he had to buy it. And he went up, it was in Massachusetts, bought this house. Turned out that W.B. Du Bois' mother was a maid in that house.
Oh, my God.
Like all these things and all these connections to it. And there was a story about it, and it went viral. It went viral. I mean, everyone was like talking about this story. And I said, this is like one of those makeover,
Yeah.
I said, I'm not coming to dinner when the cameras are there, but it's one of those makeover things. So he's actually doing this now. And I said, because I've worked with OWN, with Oprah's company, I said, I want to introduce you to them because it's a perfect OWN show. And so I took him and we had this meeting, and I literally got him in the door there. And then he called me and he got this deal, and they're actually filming now.
That's so
and he
great.
says, I now know how it feels to be a white boy. And I said, what do you mean? He said, my father took me into the president of the company. He said, I didn't have to go through all these levels and channels and
great.
what we always have to do. He said, I went
great.
right to the top, and
So
you
great.
did that.
That's so great, Charles.
And they're filming now, and I just look at that and I think how we all can make a difference, how we all can change things, just in how we communicate, but how we give people opportunities.
Yep.
And we were fortunate in our families pushing us, even though you especially female in Alaska, us having to work the way, and she's been trying to get me to go to Alaska forever, which I'm not doing. But I told, finally, after that, my present to her, after all she's done for me, is to come.
She's gonna go.
I'm going to come
He's gonna
to
come.
Alaska. I'm not doing one of those prop planes, though. I
No,
have to,
no.
it would take me like
Four-seater. Don't worry, Charles.
Yeah, exactly. But what we have to, but everyone has a struggle. And that's the other thing that I had to also realize, because certain people, certain of my friends didn't realize that it would be difficult, the journey. See, I've always known what I had to face. And whereas I had other friends who didn't realize what that was, and it destroyed them, that it wasn't just given to them.
Right.
So I'm very aware of say the different levels of what that is, and how we all have to see each other differently, And that's the thing. I guess I'll start that now. You have always seen me. That's what made all the things I've done here, things that we're so honest with each other, because I would see something and Molly would see something with me and just say that was terrible, it was number one from love, but number two, I trust you implicitly, and we may not have the same view of something, but it would always make me think, this doesn't work. I need to figure out what to do. It may not be, I may not have found it, but it sent me on that journey. But Arena truly made me the artist that I am, and you did that. You allowed me, yes. people always would say to me, and even recently, don't you want to run a theater? And I was like, no. And I had several friends, Sheldon Epps at Pasadena, Carrie at ACT. I said, my friends, and I did a few shows there, but all these shows I did here, I said, one of my best friends in the world runs a theater. It's great. I can come there, cause problems, leave. But I also, what we were talking about earlier, it's the safety I felt, and no matter what I did, I was in DC when when you talk about these things, I remember when the shooter, when
Yes.
that was happening,
Yes.
we were doing anthems.
Yep.
And what that was like and what that world was in anthems and having to be
unbelievable.
like, can we go outside, but still to keep creating theater no matter what, just those things. And you just kept going. I have to tell this though. This is my favorite Molly is Guys and Dolls. We were in the Fitch. It was like the third or fourth preview. It was going so great. I was thrilled. Steve was in that. I was so happy, Steve, ladies and gentlemen, yes. I was so happy with this. And you had just announced the season, and a subscriber had come up and said, and just lit into Molly, how dare you, what was it?
K2.
K2. How dare you do K2? You can't do that. It was a masterpiece. You can't do that again. You can't put that in season. Just went off. And Molly just stood there, and she then said, don't come. I'm sorry. I knew that she was a special place in my heart. I knew I loved her, but from that second, I worshipped Molly Smith. And then from that point...
what that guy said is, well, of course I'm coming.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, that's it. And everyone was so happy. And Molly, I remember too, because you never did a Christmas Carol, because everyone would do a Christmas Carol at Christmas, and that's how you make your money, and it makes everybody happy and all of this. And we were doing Guys and Dolls, and it was Christmas, and everybody would come in, and Molly would go, Merry Christmas, and it was our Christmas Carol. But that moment just, it also just gave me the bravery to say what I felt.
Yeah.
That I can be brave enough to say, no, I don't like something, or this may not be for you, and that's okay. That's all right that you actually could do that. I was stunned by that. That was I think it's my favorite Molly moment, because I was standing there in shock, because also you're the artistic director and you have to appease everyone and be nice and all this stuff. And it wasn't rude. You were just it was so matter of fact. I want that, it's that. I was like, I aspire to that, which it was so good.
Well, we know that no is one of the most powerful
Yes.
words in the American language.
Yes, which I use a lot, as you know.
Yep. and it worked out really, really well for you.
Yes.
So I'm going to turn it out to the audience in about, does anybody have a watch on? What time is it?
Oh.
Okay. I'm going to turn it out to the audience in about 5 minutes. And after we're done, too, the bar is going to stay open out there if anybody wants to have a drink. Say hi to Charles, talk about what you've just heard, continue asking questions. I'm really curious about you, Charles, and this confluence that you've had between theater and film and television, because he has a big career happening there. He has big ideas of a big future of things that he wants to do and create. Will you talk about what that journey has been for you, and also talk about what's next for you in that area? Because I think these are people that are your fans. These are people that have been following your work for years and years and years, and they're going to be curious about it.
Okay. Typically, when you start in something, you stay in that same realm, and that's something I've always been uncomfortable doing. I wanted. People would say, do you write or direct? Yes, right. Do you work in television, film, or theater? Yes. I love theater and what this is, but television, especially now, reaches so many people.
Yeah.
Its impact, it's so important, and I'm I'm so proud I get to do that, and I know the effect that it has, and the amount of people, because I'm really concerned about what Broadway has become, and what and how it still is in one lane, and what the three men who control Broadway decide happens in New York. And that's a very difficult place to be. You know, doing Trouble in Mind last year, which I tried for 20 years to get on
Yeah.
Broadway. And we finally did, and it was such an amazing experience. Every single person would say to me, you rewrote this. You rewrote this. And I said, no, Alice Childress wrote this 66 years ago. And I first read her in college, and I've been obsessed with her ever since. And I wanted her words to get out there because that did not happen. I can't even imagine, years ago to be offered to have an off-Broadway show, to be offered Broadway and be the first female playwright on Broadway, and to say no because they wanted to change your work. That she did that was astounding to me. And then they ended up picking up another little show called Raisin in the Sun instead of her. And she never saw this in her lifetime. And I wanted that.
Well, and she said no because she wouldn't change the end of the play.
She wanted to change, and it was too hard hitting.
Yeah.
They wanted her to bring back certain characters, certain things, because she really calls out the business,
Right.
and what that is, and she would not do it.
Yeah.
And I wanted this play, and they kept saying, "Well, we're doing it off Broadway," and I was like, "No, it has to go to Broadway."
Yeah.
And so we worked, and we finally did that. Last year was nominated for a Tony. I mean, all of the stuff.
Big success.
And it was so amazing. Molly was there my third night,
preview.
giving me my Molly notes, and they were all really good too, which I didn't want to tell her, but but it's that because we support each other that way. But what's just happened is I wrote a screenplay of this because I wanted a film of this work because it's so tremendous, and I wrote a screenplay of it, and we've been, my team's been out there with it, and I had a lot of interest in it, but everyone wanted me to put stars in it, which is what, you do. It's on Broadway, then you move or wherever it is, and they wanted to put stars in it, and I kept saying no, and actually a month ago, I just got the funding, and this summer, I'm going to shoot the film of Trouble in Mind with the original Broadway cast in it. Yeah. Yeah. So it's so thrilling to me, and calling each actor to tell them that they were going to do it and that we were doing this, and to be able to
Yeah.
make that happen.
Yeah.
To now be at that point, finally that I could actually do that, and then the work that I get to do that way is amazing. It's amazing. So the one I ended up last year doing. I got called for a project, and I just went, this is impossible. I can't do this. And it said, first of all, it was a Christmas project. And I said, I'm a real Scrooge, so Christmas. There are all these kids in it. Oh my God. And it was Tim Allen, Santa Claus, right? And I was like, Tim Allen, conservative Tim Allen and me in the same place. I did not see that happening. And the next thing I know, I am in Los Angeles directing Tim Allen Santa Clauses, which was on Disney Plus this year that we did. It was a huge success. And there was one day, well, the whole time, I actually had a great time with him, but there was a day on set, but I had my whole image of who he was and what he's done and who he is, which he acknowledges. And we were having these great conversations, which they should have filmed. But one day we were talking about comedy, and he said to me that his mentor was Richard Pryor. And that's the last thing
Wow.
I expected out of his mouth. But when I saw as we were working, I realized he had that timing and that energy.
interesting.
And I almost didn't do the project because he was in it, and such I would say Trumpish as opposed to Trumper. I almost didn't do it. And I thought 10 years ago, I never would have thought about with someone, that would not have stopped me from doing work. We don't talk to each other. And we have these walls where we can disagree on things, but I almost did not do this, and especially every Christmas when these residuals come in, I would have been unhappy that I didn't do it, but the fact that and I had such a great time with him. So to be able to do that kind of work, and then to be able to do what that is, and then and the different people I get to work with, and I'm doing a Sidney Poitier play,
Right.
and who I still, this is so hard for me to actually say this, but he asked me to write his story. And I was just, I'm still gobsmacked, as they say in England, by doing that. But I really, and spent time with him talking, obviously, before he passed, and just to tell his story because he wanted it on stage. They just did a documentary. His daughter's writing a film about him, but he always wanted to return to stage, and he asked me to do that. So I mean, and it was, I was so nervous turning in the first draft, and because some things I was like, "Ooh, can I go this far?" And the family were like, "Do it." They said, "We want." He became this icon. He was human.
Yeah.
Deal with that, and to have again. Barry Gordy, these people who support the families, like, please, we support you doing this work this way. So it's amazing the difference. So in theater, in TV, in film, the work that I get to do, and all these years of fighting these battles, like now to think that these doors, I kick those doors open, and typically they close, but they aren't fully open, but they're staying open,
More than a crack. Dan.
More than a crack.
Yes.
No, what is it? Like you finally, you wait outside in the waiting room, and you get in the room to find it's another waiting room.
That's right.
That's
right.
So finally I get in the room.
But it's a bigger waiting room,
it's
and
a
there's
bigger,
streets.
and it's nice.
And there's streets.
Yes. And it's Pellegrino is in the waiting room. But I'm so grateful that I get to do what I do. And I always often say it's hard being grateful and bitter at the same time. Which I am, but grace is winning, and that's faith. That's that. How do you, and just realizing my ancestors and how they fought and what they did. And that's why American Prophet this past summer was so important to me, and being able, thanks, again, to recognize a woman who had never been in history. And now the fact that, Frederick Douglass won't be taught. No less his wife. So we have to do this. This is the work and this show is that important to me. And I want it in every school, everything, which we're working on. So, yes.
So great, Charles.
Yeah.
So we're going to open it up to some questions from the audience for Charles, for me. We've got a mic here. Does anybody want to raise their hand? Some burning question you've always wanted to have an answer to?
Hello, this question is for Charles. What is your favorite part of each of those art forms?
Ooh. Theater is the live interaction. Television, you have to say in one line what you would say in 10 in theater. So it's the brevity and the immediacy of what that does. And film is the visual. To me, there's nothing like seeing what a big screen is, what film does. And so for me, each of those worlds inform the next. So I use that film visual in many ways in theater, and I use what I know from each thing. But I guess that's what I love about each form, how I shift when I'm in that form of how you tell the story in a different form. Like, it'll be so great to go from Trouble in Mind stage to doing it on film, and how that translates.
This side?
Hi, I have a kind of similar question, but I just want to know what pieces of art you've really enjoyed recently, whether it's theater, film, TV, music. I'm just curious to know.
Okay, my assistant is a huge Beyonce fan, and I know I have to say I've never been a big Beyonce fan. I'm sorry, excuse me, because I know people, that'll get you, the Beehive will come after you. But I loved this last album. That it just affected me. Break My Soul really affected me, and it came out when we were doing American Prophet. And I literally would listen to Break My Soul every day walking to the theater because it was Beyonce. because it was so I love when art can do that. It just pushed me in the door to tell this story. What she was saying, "You won't break my soul." It's like that's what that's what Frederick Douglass said 170 years ago, right? And so that did that for me completely. I mean, there's different work, but that especially had that kind of music will do that. What I love the most are museums. And because I love to go and look at art and just and see it and hear it and feel it. And so whenever I'm working, that's what I do to counter it, my madness.
And I just saw Leopoldstadt
Yes.
in New York, and if you haven't seen it, it is epic. It's overwhelming. It is a remarkable story. It takes place World War I, moving into World War II, and after. It's a big family play. And the same time, I saw the big Hopper exhibit in New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is
You texted me immediately.
absolutely.
Yes.
It is a beautiful show. It's a powerful show about his relationship to New York and his wife's relationship to New York, and the work that he did living in a third floor walk-up,
Right.
and
Amazing.
how they did the work that they did. It's really, really gorgeous.
A show that inspires me, a musical, and I actually was so inspired. A friend of mine was a producer, and I invested in it, which I never do, with Kimberly Akimbo in New York. And it's just extraordinary. The best way, it leaves this lump in your throat that I can't describe. It's just storytelling on every level at its best. So to do work like that, film-wise, it would be Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I was so jealous watching that movie. I was like, I needed to make this movie. That's when so that kind of storytelling, that kind of Leopoldstadt as well, amazing work. And I think again, it's where people just jump in
Yep.
and tell their truth,
Yep.
That's what that is. That's what I love. And everything, I'm sure they didn't think that film would make anything, do anything, and look at
Yep.
it's extraordinary. Yeah.
One more question. Anybody?
How do you feel?
Well,
Oh, there's one. Oh,
How do you feel about this being the last time that you two are
Stop it. Do his first, and let's end with that.
Charles, I see in your straight plays musicality
Yes.
and poetry. What is your background in music? That's number one. And number two, when as a boy did you first know that you were seeing the world differently?
Ooh. I was a musician. I played trumpet. And so that was my musical background. And I was in this very small town in South Carolina, but our band was the championship band, and we performed all over. And
Where in
that's
South
how-
Carolina?
In York, South Carolina. So just south of Charlotte. So that was my art, and I saw what music did with people. And I was always aware that music shifts you, can change you. So it was that. I think watching different people, it's so interesting now because I did an article recently about this, but my idols growing up were Berry Gordy, and watching what Motown was such an effect on me, and watching him though, he was more of an effect on me than the artist. Just the fact that this man who looks like me controlled, this because I always want control, right? that he could, and then Sidney Poitier was my idol, this image that I saw in shows. So the fact that I ended up working with this journey has been finding this. But as a kid, those were the images, especially those two men, that made me realize that I could actually do something, even being from this. As I always say, geography doesn't limit your dream. That you can be in this tiny town of South Carolina. It still amazes me sometimes when I think that from whence I came, it was so unlikely that I get to do what I do, and that I've had, even though the bitter part of my career, the grace, the gratefulness I've had that I've able to find the Mollies in my world that have given me the gift that my family gave me of you have permission to dream. And I had that as a young, and of course I was the one always making the church things and doing the program and making people perform in the backyard. And I mean, all that. It was that, you've heard that story, but yes, I did all that. And then, when you find someone who believes in you, and I remember, Molly, I said this to Suzanne to deal with your question. When the first day of rehearsal on American Prophet, I said to the company, I wish that each of you will have an experience that I have had with Molly. This makes me emotional. Someone that will completely believe in you, no matter what. When it's wrong, when it's bad, when it's teetering on the edge, when it's dangerous, or when it's just frivolous or just fun, that you have someone that believes in every single thing that you do, And when you have that belief, when you have that person doing that for you, it'll make you climb and fly higher and higher. And you'll fall, but you have to fall to fly high, right? So to have someone like Molly, to actually this is bittersweet because this is the last time we will do this here. And we've done this so much, our conversations, but to be able, as I did earlier, to finish with saying thank you to you for not just me, I know I'm your favorite, but not just me, so many of us that you gave permission to do the work that they do, the work that's gone so many places, and how, the last thing that I thought was this white woman from Alaska would change my life, and you did, and yes. And I wish all of you, no matter what age, whoever that person is that gives you that freedom, that gift of spirit, that yes, you can go try something no matter what age you are, no matter how you look, where you're from, that gives you the power so that when the critics and when the things, and now the younger people here, I'm so, we didn't have to deal with the madness of the internet and the madness of what that world is and how that's changed how you all view things, that you can just put that aside and be able to find the joy. And ultimately, that's what I have found here in these 25 years, and in you, joy. So thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And this is a relationship like all great relationships that will go through time. This doesn't end here. It's been 25 incredible years. I have to say there's nothing like having Charles come in and see a production that I'm doing. And afterwards, he would say to me, oh, I know exactly what you need to do. Oh, I've got an idea for you. Oh, you got to look over here. Watch out over here. You got to get rid of that. And that friendship, that warmth, that being together when something tragic would happen, like on Senior Discretion himself, that never got what it should have gotten, and going through that kind of heartbreak together and going through the heartbreak of losses in both of our lives, and being friends through it all, Charles, being soulmates, being family members together. I mean, when I was thinking about leaving Arena, the whole question for me was, how do I say goodbye? Right? I've held magic in my hand with great artists, with great audiences, with great stories, and I have to let it go. So this was one of the opportunities to be able to do this with you, Charles. But now it's like, and now what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
What's next for Arena? Something fantastic, I know. What's next for me? What's next for you? I know fantastic things. And I just,
It's the Renaissance, right? It's the Renaissance that comes. Beyonce's album, Renaissance. I
It's a
mean,
renaissance.
it's that the Renaissance comes after the devastation.
Yeah.
Right. And your Renaissance, we will always be together. You
Yep.
know, it won't be in this specific thing, but that Renaissance, you know. But we both allowed each other to find that, you know. And it's the next, giving permission for the next version.
that's
that,
exactly right.
you know, but it's your Renaissance, which I can't wait to see. And again, what you've done has changed changed the world, Molly. It's changed the world.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Charles. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And join us out at the bar, please. Thanks so much.
It's like Barbara Walters with the, you know.
That was great, Charles.